Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Friday, August 29th, 2025, episode 476, and we're going to talk about a variety of topics. But first, yesterday was open house at the school, so I had to be at the school till late. Also, there's a lot of logistical stuff now that teachers have to do, getting their class online, Google Classrooms, setting up and learning the new grading program, because every school, it seems, is required to use something different. And so, and plus, particularly because of the school where I'm teaching, security, cyber, and physical is extremely high priority. And there are layers and layers of security. So it's hard to get it all straight. And I'm very confused. Anyway, but part of what this episode is about is what I do for my church. So a lot of them, they work all day, they're busy all day. And so what I try to do is listen to as much news as possible, digest it, and sort of present them with a report. And I try to work it in. If you listen to my Sunday sermons, then you know that I try to work in some of the more prominent stories, something that may be something that may directly affect them in some way, or at least their attitude, or at least to get them to have a better understanding of some global events that have been going on. But anyway, I've been doing that for a while now. Uh, and the comforting thing is that, a lot of the things that I told them they should prepare for, it actually has happened. So when the lockdowns happened, I told everyone, it's probably not true, but if you're afraid, just stay at home. I told them that there's probably going to be a war happening soon, and then Russia invaded Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. And so I try to keep them up to date. That way, when they manage their own personal affairs, they can try to start figuring out what they need to do. And obviously, they know what to do better than me because it's their life, not mine. In other words, how they've lived their life up to this point. They've made certain decisions, maybe, hopefully, some investments. Maybe they've been saving. We stress saving a lot. And, the whole time preference thing. And so if they do have savings, and no one ever tells me if they do or not, it's just very open-ended. I say, just in case, then you want to try to move out of this and don't do that. If you have debt, you might want to, start paying that, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that. And so basically, that's kind of what I do. I listen to as much news as possible. Sometimes I look at the headlines. Sometimes I listen to entire podcasts, speed it up, of course, to try to get through more than uh, there is time in the day. And then, anything that sort of jumps out, I haven't talked about before, then I stick on the podcast. And so that's what this episode is going to be about. School starts next week. Wednesday is the first day. I'll probably be able to do an episode for Labor Day. I think it's Labor Day, right? I'll do an episode on Labor Day, probably another one on Tuesday, and then I don't know what's going to happen for the rest of the week. But obviously, nothing big will happen in the second half of next week, and then we'll see. No matter what, I will still be doing sermon episodes, obviously. And those of you who don't listen to that, well, it doesn't matter. But I'll be doing that, right? Because that's my other job. I have to preach on Sunday. All right, so here we go. I was listening to the Commodity Culture podcast episode today, and they had King Kong. He's a Chinese guy. He's been on several episodes, right? He just sort of popped on the scene, and he knows what he's talking about. He does a lot of commentary over there in, I think, Hong Kong or Taiwan, or even I don't know. But his English is fantastic. I'm jealous because he's clearly bilingual, perfectly bilingual. But anyway, so King Kong, Eric Young, I think is his English name. And the title of the episode is Who Dropped $1 Billion on Gold in a Single Trade? right? And so that might explain a little bit of the price action of late. And so they were talking about that, but they were also talking about the silver market and that whatever you might want to call it, manipulation, suppression, whatever they were doing and how they were doing it, it was working to the benefit of the Chinese. And to hear, yeah, I'm probably saying it wrong, summarizing it incorrectly, but I'm just giving you some tidbits. And so if you want more information, then you can go listen to the podcast yourself. But what the what appeared to be price suppression in the silver market is actually working, in King Kong's words, acting as a subsidy for Chinese buying of silver, right? Because they were industrializing, they were making all these solar panels, and so they need all this silver. And so keeping the price down enabled them and allowed them to be able to industrialize much, much faster. And so the United States, however, whether it's Trump or whoever is advising him, said, oh no, in order for us to reindustrialize, we have to keep our silver here. And so a couple days ago, he listed it as a critical mineral, which basically means no more exporting of silver from the United States. And basically sends the message that we're no longer going to subsidize you. There's now going to be competition from us. Whether, that's the intent, whether there's any kind of reality behind it remains to be seen. Okay. Because remember, and I said this a couple months ago, I believe, that Trump's strategy is to reindustrialize America. And so a lot of the things that he's doing is the attempt to try to bring manufacturing back to the United States. If you listen to Peter Schiff, he'll tell you that this is not the way to do it, right? It's a very uncertain way of doing it. Trump leaves office in what, 3 years? He becomes a lame duck at us, probably after the midterm elections, and so uh, his policies that he enacts, if a Democrat comes in after him, then all of it will just simply be rolled back. And so people can't take the risk to invest billions of dollars to build a factory that the Democrats will turn around and shut down. Okay. So, but nevertheless, silver was announced and listed as a critical mineral. And so people speculate that accumulation is very likely. People will hear that, oh, critical mineral, let's start buying. And so after that became more well known, silver touched $40 today. It closed a little bit before 39.70 or something like that. Let me do a quick check. 39, the bid is 61. I guess that's the spot price, 39.61. I don't know what that sound was from. Anyway, uh, and so silver touched very briefly, like maybe for a couple seconds, it was $40.03. But obviously then it sold off a little bit. So these distortions and the swings and the big swings up and down is a result of, government pronouncements, government um, you know, call it manipulation, right? Whether it's just jawboning the market up or down or subtly influencing through trade policy, it affects commodity prices. It begs the question, will it be monetized? Russia has announced that they are accumulating silver. Obviously, there's an industrial component to it. And so people want silver anyway for the industrial aspect of it. But in that episode, obviously, the title is $1 billion of gold in a single trade. And the reason why that's so unusual is that it creates a price spike. And if you really want the gold at a certain price, then you try to do it on the sly. You buy a little bit at a time, so that way it doesn't affect the gold price all that much. And so this one person in one trade buys $1 billion. It's probably a paper buy, right? They're buying paper contracts, it seems. Maybe not, but I didn't catch that. Usually it happens and the reason why it's so significant is because usually it happens in the opposite way. Someone dumps $1 billion of gold to try to bring the gold price down, but someone bought. And so the topic of gold revaluation came up again, and King Kong said that there are two scenarios. One is that the price of gold is marked to market, right? So the current price is around 3,400, and so Trump says, okay, gold goes from $42 to 3,400, right? Mark to market, and that way he doesn't have to do tariffs, he doesn't have to do any of that kind of protectionism thing. Otherwise, if the price goes really high or arbitrary high price, like $10,000, $20,000, then people are going to take all their gold and they're going to dump it in America, which I don't see as a bad thing. But they're going to try to do that to take advantage of the arbitrage, right? So in other places in the world, it's still being sold for 3,400, but here in America, if it's 10,000, they're going to take their gold and then try to make a profit by selling it over here. And so if there is an arbitrary high price, then there's going to be tariffs, right? That way to prevent gold dumping, I guess, which is weird because it's gold, right? Then Vince Lanci in the episode where it says, here's how much gold central banks actually need to buy. And he's talking about basically how BRICS nations and any other nation that's trying to build up its gold reserves, and that's primarily big BRICS and wannabe BRICS countries are doing. The estimate was that they need to have their currency backed 30% backing with gold. And if that's the case at current prices, right? Remember what I said about buying a lot all at once, it spikes the price. But at the current price, if they were to accumulate all the gold that they need to, but it stays at 3,400, then we're looking at $2 trillion worth of gold, right? And so that will probably have an effect if they're successful and they go to a gold back situation. Then what happens to all of the European currencies, right? They're going to be in trouble. Not to mention, and I mentioned before, what happens when you revalue gold, all of the prices of all the goods sold in that country are going to go up proportionately, right? So if it goes up by 60%, then all the prices of all the goods in society are going to go up at least 60%. So if you raise gold to an arbitrary high price, like if it's raised to 20,000, I think it was, I did the math, right? And so it's an 80, right? And you're going from $42 to 10,000 or 20,000. And so you're looking at, right, 8,000 uh, uh 8,000% rate rise in the or no, you're going to raise it by a factor of 8,000, right? So it's not twice as expensive, it's 8,000 times more expensive. And so imagine what the prices of bread are going to be, bread and milk, if that were to happen, which is probably why that's not the route that's going to be taken. Next, there is a Sirius Report episode, Paul and Ken on the Sirius Report. And the title of the episode is US to buy Russian gas through the Nord Stream pipeline. And so basically, we're talking about how Trump always wants to make the deal. I talked about how the Alaska summit between Putin and Trump was more a summit on economics, not a discussion on the Ukraine. And so basically, apparently, there is talks between ExxonMobil and let's see, what's that Russian company? I thought I wrote it down. There's a Russian company. I'm sorry. I thought I wrote it down. Anyway, there's a Russian company, Russian gas company that I guess well, anyway, ExxonMobil is in discussion with them to try to, take advantage of the natural gas, LNG, liquid natural gas, coming out of Russia. ExxonMobil used to be in Russia, but with the invasion, they were forced to leave. Now they're trying to find their way back, and that's because the LNG gas production here in America is failing. And so 2024, it's in severe decline, and that's because the price of gas is going down. And I think it's the whole fracking thing. Fracking became economically viable in the United States because of the price of oil and the price of gas. They work together to make it either worthwhile or not. And Russian gas is much, much cheaper. And so they talked about how the US would basically rebuild the Nord Stream pipeline. It was blown up apparently by the Ukrainians who were arrested recently. Coincidence or not, that's what they were saying. Is it all coincidental? And they can blame it Biden, blame the British, and Trump can say, I had nothing to do with that. So they make the deal, repair the Nord Stream pipeline, they buy the gas from Russia and then sell it, act as a middleman to sell it to all the Europeans. The Europeans have to do it this way because they swore off buying anything from Russia. And so they have to go through a middleman, and Trump will say, this is what you have to do. Now, they describe, Ken and Paul describe this as a win-win because then if uh, if someone messes around with Russia, Russia cuts off all of the gas. So then the US then, because they're making profit, US business interests, corporations, lose money. And so then anyone who messes with Russia would have to contend with the United States. And if it's the US that messes with Russia, then Russia just simply cuts it off. And we know that the United States has to protect its big donor class, and that would be, you know, whatever gas company's interests that they're catering to. Now, ExxonMobil would be that company, and what they have announced was that if the agreement goes through, they're going to give a 5% stake to the United States government, right? It's like just like Intel gave a 10% stake, Exxon will do 5%. And the funny thing is that everyone was already getting their gas from India through India, right? So Russian gas that was coming through India. So the United States wants to take over that role, I guess. So these two stories, how does this even represent the United States, right? All of this backdoor scheming, right? Publicly cursing each other out, insulting each other, beating the war drums, and then in the back room, right? They're making these deals. How does this represent me or you? And basically, it doesn't. We are simply being used by people who are in power. We don't benefit, but we're going to be milked. We're going to be bled by those people in power for their benefit. If there's a conflict, if there's a war, our children have to go fight. Their children do not, right? We have to basically pay the subsidies so that ExxonMobil can do business with Russia. But do we get any of the profits? No. So it's that socialization of the losses, privatization of the profits. It's like, why did 1.7 million Ukrainian soldiers have to die in this stupid war, right? For what benefit? How do they gain? What is the benefit? There is none. But we are propagandized to the point where you have idiots who believe that it's patriotic to advocate and support and continue to fund a war where 1.7 million soldiers have died. And it's very disgusting, right? Do we need government for any of this, right? Do we need any of this? And why do we need a government to create these problems for us? I mean, think about it. If I'm the CEO of ExxonMobil, why do I need the US government to negotiate with a business in another country? Why do I need them? Uh, I don't. That's the thing. It's because government wants their cut. Government wants to muscle in on the action and say, okay, we have to give you permission to do this. And if you want permission, then you have to give us a percentage. Also, if I was not one of the insiders for the government, then I would probably have a harder time. In other words, if my neighbor also has a gas company and but they know Donald Trump, well, then they get the deal, not me. And that's how the corruption happens. It's very disgusting. And so it's not based on the quality of the work, the quality of your business, how well you treat your workers, how well you're going to treat people in the other country. It hasn't, how honest are you? How are you going to abide by the terms of the contract? And none of it matters. What matters is, oh, I know the president, so I'm going to get the deal. And more often than not, they are not the best, right? They are not doing things in a way that would result in uh, a sustainable, successful for a very long time kind of company. Now, regardless of everything that we just talked about so far, the rest of the world is actually doing better with the US out of all of these deals, right? Countries are finding peace with each other. China found peace with India. Russia is has found peace with China, Brazil and China. You know, all of the tariff talk, all of the tax talk, war drum beating, oh, you better do this or else, all of that has resulted in pushing countries together, alienating, isolating the United States. And I've said this numerous times before. I even posted it on X as well, that the US military, right, the foreign policy right now, that is isolationist. I've said before that being anti-war is not isolationist, but being pro-war is. And now it becomes very obvious, hard to deny, to see unless you are willfully blind. Another problem that, of course, is becoming more and more obvious is that, Trump will not be able to be maintain his power after the midterm elections. Also, the next president, if the Democrats can somehow come up with a halfway decent candidate, someone not like Harris or Waltz, then they'll win the next presidential election. And then the pendulum of power will swing back the other way. And if not the next presidential election, then the next one after that. Right. But will the Democrats, when they come back to power, will they do anything different? Oh, no. Only the personalities will change. The specific people who benefit will change, not this company, that company. I like this person, not this person. So then you have all of this sort of a carousel or musical chairs, basically, of who benefits and who does not. Everything that's being done will be intensified, whether it's the employment of using federal agents against illegal immigrants. Well, now they'll be used against legal citizens of the United States because they posted something that someone in Washington didn't like. Whatever's happening in Washington, excuse me, in Europe right now, that's what we have to look forward to here. And all the while, people are talking about democracy. Ugh, please, they had democracy the last election. They lost the election, and they're saying because it's not real democracy. So basically, they're like little children. Anyone who complains, they'll say, "Oh, it's only good if it goes my way." Right? Little kids, little immature kids who need a spanking. One person, especially what we all have to always have to remember, one person is not smart enough to be able to rule all of America, right? There's too many different interests. There are too many different scenarios and life situations which need subtlety, which needs hands-on knowledge of what's going on. Not even AI would be able to run the country properly, unless, of course, it's programmed by Austrian economists, right? But AI requires programming, and depending on the politics and morality of the programmer, then you're going to have your AI. Also, we have to remember that one special interest group does not trump all other minorities. I was talking to an old student. Oh, this goes way back. And she said that she's a labor union advocate, right? Okay, well, you can do that if you want, but you have to realize that by advocating for them, you are discriminating against all other workers. What makes them special? Why do they deserve more rights and privileges than anybody else? And so to privilege one special interest group, whether they be professional union workers or African Americans or Asian Americans, whatever. To privilege one group means injustice for everybody else. And you all know I always try to fight for the smallest minority. That would be the individual, right? Freedom for everyone. Cut government, just slash it, burn it down, whatever. Just whittle it down to the barest of minimum, and everyone will have much more freedom. And then we wouldn't need the government. We would maybe even reset our tolerance of all of this government intervention in our lives, right? We don't need these politicians. Wouldn't it be great? All these people who hate Trump. Well, what if Trump didn't matter? Well, then, okay, if you want to waste your day talking about him who doesn't affect your everyday life because you have the freedom to still do whatever it is you want, right? Well, then I would much rather have that, right? It's just get rid of all of these bureaucrats, all of these politicians, all these government agencies, and help us to rediscover freedom. Let us be the one making the deals directly with people in China, people in Russia, people in India, not these morons who are basically ill-informed, badly informed, and steers us into crisis after crisis, right? Something to think about for the weekend. That's it for this episode. I will talk to you next time.